So you people out there in podcast land, it's just me and you now because Cody just went to refill his notes. And you Princes of Pod Space. Oh, he's back. Okay, so he hasn't even done it yet.
I Deepak Chopra'd the bowl, and now I got to Anna Paquin.
He's got all these words for things.
Words.
Half of the words are all references. It is Darmok and Jalad. It's so Darmok and Jalad with Cody Frakes.
I apologize.
No, I like it.
But hey,
I like it.
Maybe our listeners are going to develop this like vernacular as well.
You're going to spread it.
Hey, if you think this is confusing, just wait till you see what me and Muleman Jared have been cooking up, because we're creating a whole new fucking language for our thing.
Yeah, it's going to be unintelligible. Well, it'll be like Clockwork Orange. You read it and you're just like, but after, 20, 30 pages, you start to realize, oh, I know what this is.
It's going to be a real tangle wrangle, but believe me, everything is going to turn out madrone and oak. And
I can imagine madrone is probably a positive thing just because it's such a great wood. So contextually, I'm already halfway there.
Yeah, it's all based on wood and nature references and so forth. But anyway,
so
I gotta get into. There's a format, Garth.
Okay. So I don't want to step on the toes of the format. This is an interesting podcast because sometimes we have a format. And other times we don't, and I'm never sure, depending on the episode, whether are we structured. This is a structured episode, is what you're saying.
The structure usually starts with the official, the spiel.
Yeah. Oh, should I turn my microphone to be more facing away from you?
Probably. For a second, I was scared. I thought you were going to say, should I be turning my microphone on?
Should my microphone be on right now, Cody?
As long as it's in the rejection pattern. Talk right now.
Well, okay, but I'm talking.
Good, it's in the rejection pattern.
But your microphone is not facing enough away from mine.
But I'm not seeing my thing in your waveform.
Well, if you made the waveforms real big, it might be very subtle. It could be subtlety to it there.
I'm looking at them right now.
All right, I trust you.
I'm not seeing it.
Okay. Well, in that case, wait. Well, hold on. Because it'd be more comfortable if I did this.
God. Amateurs, man. This is season 4. I guess if I speak really loud.
All right. So speak really loudly. See if you end up on my mic.
Hello.
Did you see yourself?
Garth.
Hi, Cody.
I guess I did see myself a little bit.
Okay.
I was speaking really loud.
Are you worried about it?
I'm not.
All right, great. Well, I'll keep it this way. This is much more comfortable.
Everything should be fine.
All right. I think we're ready to go.
Yeah. Okay. Pop it and lock it.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Music is playing.
Okay.
Hello. Went down the wrong pipe. Okay.
That's how you start a show.
No,
you just cracked all of your knuckles at once as you stretched out there. That was crazy.
And my spine just snapped into place in a whole bunch of ways.
Wow.
My spine goes out of alignment like all the time, all day. It's weird. Every time I stretch and pull my shoulders back, it pops in.
You're like a cat.
It's actually spinal degeneration. But yeah, like a cat. Hello and welcome to the Least Haunted Podcast, a place where science, skepticism, humor, and anthropology meet to discuss all things spooky, haunting, supernatural, and sometimes just the plain ridiculous. I'm your host, Cody Franks, and joining me as almost always is the notoriously named narrator, naturally negating nasty, nefarious, ne'er-do-well nemesis, nonchalantly knowing neither nonsense nor non-chance, nevertheless nodding, northerly, needing not gnarly nocturnal netherworld naughtiness.
Garth. Yeah, yep, that's all correct. That's accurate.
That
one was easier to follow somehow than some. There was a flow to it.
Yeah,
I got it.
Yeah, that one came from our Discord. It was a team effort on Discord from everybody on there.
Whenever we're gonna record an episode, the Discord goes a buzzing with Garth's monikers. I never look at that section because I want to be surprised. Well done. Well done, everybody.
I just kind of gave them the prompt where it's like, let's hear something in the key of N.
Nice. So, that is some alliterative. That's got to be like 20 or 30 words. That's a lot of words.
1, 2, 3, 4. 5.
Anyway, as Cody counts that, I'll just like to say hi to everybody. Welcome to the podcast. He's still counting.
25.
Oh, see, I said between 20 and 30 words. That was dead center.
And last episode was 23.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
got to keep beating that personal best. That's actually what this Garth's Corner is going to be about. Someone trying to beat their own record, and then the tragedies that happen afterward.
Oh, so you're saying we should stop while we're ahead? We should.
No, I'm not saying
25. That's all there is.
Yeah, that's the highest number. 25. What was that?
I think it's 24.
Wasn't that Mr. Show?
Yeah, 24.
That's the highest number.
So, all I'm saying is 24.
What about 24?
That's it. That's the highest number.
24?
That's it. Where you gonna go from there?
Yeah, 24, forget about it.
Anyway, welcome to The Least Haunted. We're going to do an episode now, and
All right.
and this is I'm Garth. This is Cody, and if you're new to this show, we're gonna do one about. Okay, we do cryptids. This is like.
Oh,
I
have a whole script.
This is a guacamole. All right, I'm gonna shut up.
I wrote 6,000 words, Garth.
You know what?
I have a planned intro.
I think I'm gonna shut up right now and let Cody take the wheel. You know what you're doing. I'm riffing for no reason. There's no reason for me to continue talking right now. Go.
Other than I was going to, before we got into anything, I was gonna do a Patreon drop at the top because we've been told by a lot of people to know that it's better to throw it in the front.
Oh yeah, we have a Patreon. So if you think that this sort of thing is worth listening to, then you can check it out.
Patreon.com/leasthaunted. And if you join at a certain level, you get your name said aloud at the end of the episode, as well as you get it to be in a song. But we'll talk about that again later at the end. But up front, yeah.
We brought it up now so that we can let you know that we're going to bring it up later.
Yeah.
So what's next on the docket? We have structure. This is a structured episode.
It's season 4, baby!
Season 4!
I know it's actually the second episode of the new pristine season, still fresh from the shrink wrap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you smell it, Garth?
I can, yeah. No,
that new season smell.
Yeah, it's kind of more lavendery than I would have expected. I like that.
I don't know, it reminds me of Xerox toner and like, do you remember that? Do you remember what a brand new CD-ROM used to smell like out of the package?
Yes. Wow, the good. Yeah.
Or how about a brand new iMac in 1999?
I don't remember what that smells like now.
Man, but do you remember 1999?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Movies, okay, pretty good.
Oh, lots of good movies.
Lots of good movies.
Yeah.
Music,
oh yeah, no, there was lots of good stuff happening in 1999.
It was the new millennium. Well, gather round, close children, and
Okay.
listen as Uncle Cody tells you about a cryptid that he had the chance to meet, but didn't, in the year 1999.
Take us there, Cody. It's story time.
Well, this is another installment in Least Haunted Origins, which means we'll take a look at a creature, event, entity, etc. that young Cody once truly believed in. Because lest we forget that younger me once proudly claimed that their chosen future profession was going to be cryptozoologist and paranormal investigator.
Oh, yeah.
Which I unfortunately made such a part of my personality at the time that my grandpa locked cryptozoologist next to my name. So that later, as his mind started to go, almost every conversation the two of us had started with him asking, "So, you still want to be a cryptozoologist and find Bigfoot?" And I'd have to act like we hadn't had this same conversation 1,000 times and patiently explain, "No, Grandpa, actually, I just got my degree in anthropology."
I was gonna say, it's at least in the ballpark.
We're actually talking...
If you had ended up being like, I don't know, an oceanographer or something, it would have been further off.
Yeah, but senile Grandpa, kind of a bummer. So we're not gonna talk about that bummer.
Oh, okay.
Instead, we're gonna talk about the time my family got a vacation to Scotland as part of my dying sister's Make-A-Wish trip. See?
Oh.
No bummers here.
Oh man, this is such an unbummer. What's the opposite of a bummer?
Loch Ness Monster.
All right, Loch Ness Monster, everybody.
That's what we're talking about. So picture this if you can.
Okay.
13-year-old, chubby, brace-faced, acneed Cody. I had hair then, Garth.
I can't picture
By
this.
gods, I had hair then.
Yeah, you didn't have any beard hair.
No, it was on the top of my head. And that hair is blowing gently in the Highland breeze as I sit on the side of a tour boat. Since it is late July, and this is the Scottish Highlands, the sky is gray and there's a scattered rain showers about. The water is gray and choppy, and the boat rocks slightly as it bounces up and down, powering against the wind. The early teenaged me, with the great hair, might I add, is gripping the chrome handrail and largely ignoring the rest of his family. He is staring intently, scanning the length and the breadth of the loch. and peering down into the gray water, looking for any sign of movement or a glimpse of fin or flipper. Now, listeners, know that I do not like lakes or deep waters. This is a known fact. Check out episode 32.
Lake Tano.
Lake Tano. And so you would think that I would be terrified, not only to be in a small boat in what is the largest body of fresh water in the British Isles, with deep, murky depths, but also it's a lake that possibly has a monster in it. But dear listeners, also know that my sense of wonderment and interest can overpower my fear. Case in point, my lifelong ambition to sail in the Norwegian fjords. So my interest in the possibility of seeing Nessie overcame the fear, and so there I sat, and silently daring the beast to show itself. Spoilers, it didn't.
Oh.
But you knew that already. Come on. If I'd seen the Loch Ness fucking monster, I would never shut up about that shit.
You probably would have started with that for this episode.
Yeah. Like, hey, let me tell you the time I fucking saw Nessie, goddammit. Giant monster from the Paleozoic era.
Did you think for a second you'd ever seen it? Like, was there like a moment where you saw a stick underwater?
There was a second. Like I saw, a little ways away, something that turned out just to be a log.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh. That trip as a whole did a lot in shaping who I am today. On the one hand, it was when I had one of my most compelling paranormal experiences. See episode 3, Spooky House, for more. But on the other hand, the overall trip helped me learn that my experiences weren't the same as those of everyone else, and that it is always good to get out of your home country. I soaked up as much Scottish culture as I could in my brief stay, mainly by buying CDs of traditional folk music and songs, which is why I know all the words to Sound the Pibroch. I can tell you how great it would be if Campbellton Loch were filled with whiskey, and were I a drinker, I would drunkenly let everyone know that I belong to Glasgow. But alas, no monster. In the metaphorical mental lock of supernatural belief in my mind, the chain on the plug had been pulled. Not enough to drain it completely, but loosened it enough that water was starting to drip down the pipe.
This is the beginning of doubt for young
Now,
Cody.
yeah, this is, I said, it's the least haunted origin story.
Okay.
Now let's talk about the Loch and the Loch Ness Monster properly.
Okay.
Garth, what do you know about the Loch Ness Monster?
Well, this is, along with Bigfoot, this is one of the biggies.
Yeah.
We haven't done a Bigfoot episode yet, and we've waited this long to do Loch Ness Monster. I think most other paranormal podcasts probably hit Nessie in the first 5 episodes.
This is episode 79.
This is episode 79. We've been waiting for some reason. I think we wanted to kind of get kind of moving. We don't want to do an amateur version of Nessie. This is a big one.
Yeah. No, I had to kind of build up my laurels and my credibility and skills before I took on.
It's a big one,
beast.
and being someone who's only been moderately into the cryptozoological thing, as opposed to you who were way into it.
Yeah.
I know plenty about. Nessie is like one of those big pop culture things, and I'm not sure why. I'm not sure what makes Nessie so much more important than dozens of others that we've covered.
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Okay. What do I know about Nessie? Big sea monster, long-necked, dinosaur-y looking thing that lives in Loch Ness, and I guess is mostly underwater. Otherwise, people would see it all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know if Nessie's supposed to be oxygen breathing or breathe underwater, but I guess the loch is really big. So there's probably plenty of underground caves Nessie could go to.
Maybe.
I can imagine ways you could live there. It's big enough that maybe you can't find Nessie.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll start with Loch Ness proper.
Okay. Let's talk about the lake itself.
Yes, Loch Ness. It's one of many lochs or lakes. Although if you're on the coast, a loch might also mean a bay.
Oh.
I've seen.
Interesting.
Like in the story, The Knucklevi, it talks about a guy jumping over a loch, but he's actually on the shoreline.
Is loch just a Scottish word for lake?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's one of many lochs along the Great Glen Fault. So the Great Glen Fault is, here in California, you can look from space and you can see the San Andreas fault line where the two continents are sliding against each other.
Yeah, it's kind of, you can tell the texture of the Earth is different.
And there's pretty much a long valley that kind of, as we talked right now, we are actually in a canyon that is formed by that convergence zone.
Yeah, we're in mountains, but we're on a larger scale. We're in a valley,
and also where we are right now, we are on the Pacific Plate. But if we look out out the studio window, and across the canyon, which is only maybe about a mile and a half as the crow flies, that is the North American Plate. So that
edge goes right through there.
The bottom of the canyon is literally the dividing point between two continental plates.
Ah, Well, I've seen photos of this. We're getting way off topic here. I've
I
seen
know, entirely, but
I've
it
seen
makes
photos
sense.
of the San Andreas Fault, and it is a line.
Yeah.
But also the way earthquakes go and the way things shift around. There's kind of a bunch of lines
Yeah.
running up and down the
Okay.
coast of California
So-
and North America.
In the Highlands of Scotland, there's something very similar,
Okay.
which is where two continental plates or pieces had combined to make Scotland, basically.
Okay.
And so it's up in the Highlands, and this thing runs in a northeast, southwesterly direction, a
Okay.
diagonal line that just goes across the Highlands of Scotland.
Got it.
And in this big valley that stretches, that's the Great Glen, you find all these lochs in that.
Okay.
Okay, so you can follow them all the way across. In fact, in 1822, a project was completed called the Caledonian Canal Project, which connected the west coast of Scotland to the east coast, or which would be the North Sea.
Oh wow.
So basically, the Irish Sea to the North Sea by way of canals and loch jumping.
Did it
So-
work like the Panama Canal?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
And so Loch Ness is part of a shipping, or it was in the last century, and in the 19th century as well. It was part of a shipping corridor, so they could move shipping fleets quickly from one side of Scotland to the other.
Wow.
So that was in 1822 when they finished that.
Oh, that's
but,
remarkable. That's a long time ago.
So Loch Ness itself is it runs in a southwest to northeast direction because it follows the Great Glen, and by surface area, it's second in size behind Loch Lomond of the famous song. But Loch Ness took the low road, by which I mean it's deeper. Therefore, by volume, it is not just the largest body of water in Scotland, but it's the largest body of water by volume in the entire British Isles.
Wow.
So it's kind of like their Lake Tahoe.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I see.
Yeah,
You said the only other big one is Loch Lomond.
Loch Lomond.
Not our local Loch Lomond.
No, we're not in Scotland. Are we in Scotland? Last time I checked, we weren't in Scotland.
Well,
guys.
okay. There's more than one Loch Lomond.
Our
on
Loch
Earth.
Lomond is named after the original Loch Lomond.
Because
in
our Loch
Scotland,
Lomond isn't all that big.
which is next to and our Loch Lomond is next to the town of Ben Lomond,
Right.
right? Ben being the word for hill,
Oh.
and I don't know what Lomond is.
I'm guessing this place was settled by Scottish people at some point.
I think actually somebody just kind of arbitrarily chose to do that
Very
because nearby
strange.
is Scots Valley, but Scots Valley has nothing to do with Scottish people.
Really?
It's just there's a family that was named Scott, but there's a rule that post offices cannot have a possessive, so they can't have like an apostrophe in the name.
Oh.
So they dropped that, so it should have been Scots' Valley, like it belongs to the Scott family, but they dropped that so that it's Scots Valley, which means everybody assumes that it has something to do with Scottish people, and then you get Ben Lomond down the road.
Yeah,
which
I thought they were all related because it's like, oh, Loch, yeah, of course.
and it's Ben Lomond, and then they made the reservoir, which is Loch Lomond, and Ben Lomond I think has to do because at the top of the hill they have what is called Bonnie Doon, which also
Bonnie, yeah.
but it was like somebody who like mistakenly thought he was referencing some Scottish like novel by naming it Bonnie Doon, but it turns out no such place was in. It has nothing to do with Loch Ness, goddammit. So
I
we can
never
get back to that.
liked Bonnie Doon because you can't see any dunes. Anyway, back to Loch Ness.
Loch Ness. Big ass fucking lake.
Yes, yeah, that has been very much established. All right.
It's 23 miles long, 744 feet deep, although there have been a few depth readings that approach 800 feet in a few places. But it averages at about 433 feet deep.
Okay.
Its volume is 1.8 cubic miles. However, in some places it can be very narrow. So it's like narrow but deep
Got it. Okay.
and long.
Mm-hmm.
At the southern end of the lake, Cherry Island speaks to the human history of the region. Can you guess what's so interesting about Cherry Island?
Well, does it grow cherry trees there? Which would be
know.
very, very, very cold place
It does
for a
not
cherry
grow
tree.
cherries, no.
Well, is it shaped like a cherry?
Actually, I don't even know
is
why.
it red?
I don't know why it's called Cherry
Well, why
Island.
do you ask me?
I asked you what was special about it, not why it was called Cherry Island.
I don't know what's special about it.
Do you know what a cranig is?
A cranig? No.
Okay, cranig is an artificial island. They were built in the Iron Age in the British Isles, and what would happen is that they would pound poles, wooden posts, like kind of like a wharf, like into the soft soil of a shoreline, and then they'd
Oh.
fill it with dirt and make this artificial island that they could then kind of have like a little a fortified home or
So this
dwelling
is a
on.
human-made island.
A man-made island from the
Wow.
Iron Age.
Wow.
currently Cherry Island is the only island that's in Loch Ness, although there used to be an island called Dog Island, but when they did that Caledonian Canal project, it raised the level of the loch. And so
Oh.
Dog Island is now underwater, and Cherry Island used to be bigger, but now it's smaller because, they raised the thing.
Oh.
Yeah. And then what about the name Loch Ness? Why is it called Loch Ness?
Ness. I don't know Scottish, so I have no idea.
Okay, so the loch gets its name from the River Ness, which runs from its northern end of the loch, and it meets with the North Sea at the city of Inverness.
So is Loch Ness fed by rains?
So there are 6 rivers that flow into Loch Ness,
And
it's
one river
also
that flows out.
yes,
Okay.
and it's also connected via another river to another loch further up the glen, because the glen is this chain of lochs and canals
Got it,
and
okay.
rivers. So yeah, but it has 6 that go in, 1 that goes out. That one that goes out is the River Ness.
I mean, are there any lakes where more than one river flows out? I don't think that would really happen.
Who knows?
Anyway.
The name Ness might be derived from an old Celtic word that means the roaring one. And now before anyone tries to say, see, the roaring one, it must be the monster.
That was what I was thinking. I was about to say that. See, Cody? The roaring one. It must mean the monster.
Well, I'm going to tell you 2 mythological origins for the name real quick.
Okay.
First one. In one version, a druid enchants a well in the middle of a dell. There's a hole in the middle of the bottom of the well in the middle of the bottom of the dell.
Okay.
His enchantment means that it will always have water in it and be flowing. But he says the cover must always be placed back on the well when not in use, or else.
Uh-oh.
Unfortunately for one woman, her house catches on fire while she is getting water from the well, and she rushes home to save her presumably now burning baby, and in doing so, forgets to cover the well so the water flows.
Oh.
The next morning, the locals awake to find a loch where the dell once was. There's a hole in the middle of the bottom of the well, in the middle of the bottom of the loch that is in the middle of what used to be the dell.
It was a dell, now it's a lock because she didn't close the lid.
The shocked folks start exclaiming, "The Loch Ness on! The Loch Ness on!" Which means there's a lock now. There's a lock now. And I assume some old Scottish version of "holy fucking shit" was included at some point.
I love that everyone gets out and there's a lake now.
There's a lake.
Did you see? There's a lake now.
But that Loch Ness on became corrupted into Loch Ness, then Loch Ness, then by extension the river that runs from this would then become the River Ness.
So it's derived from the word now, really.
Yeah.
Ah.
But there's another story that ties it to the Ulster cycle of myths, which we took a brief look at when we talked about leprechauns a few episodes back.
Ulster cycle, that sounds familiar.
That was
yes.
the King of Ulster and the leprechauns,
Oh yes,
right?
that was
Okay.
a sprawling story that went all kinds of weird directions.
Well, in this story, an Irish woman falls in love with a guy named Noas. Unfortunately, she is betrothed to Noas's cousin, the King of Ulster, Rutrow. So they flee to Scotland and get married secretly on the shores of the loch. But then the king catches up to them and he slays his cousin Noas on the shore of the loch, which then becomes known as Loch Noas, which then eventually gets corrupted to Loch Ness.
Okay.
Then by extension, the river that runs from this would be the River Ness. But as I mentioned, the loch is actually named after the river, not the other way around. And the name might not just mean the roaring one, but there's also some evidence that Ness might actually be an ancient Celtic word for river in general, and possibly also refers to a river goddess.
Okay. So we don't know, jury's out, but those are the potential.
Well, there's the 2 mythological stories, but
Yeah.
then etymological evidence or linguistic evidence
Okay.
seems to suggest that those stories are like after,
I
and it's
see.
actually named after the river, and that Ness is an old Celtic word that means river or the goddess of the river. And so it's definitely named after the river, not the other way around.
Okay.
But no, neither of those stories included a fucking monster. And they're origin stories of the lake. One explains how the lake got there, and there's no mention of a monster.
Well, that's true. I wonder when the monster first appears.
Perhaps
Perhaps Cody could tell me.
there's this guy. His name's Saint Columba. Saint Columba, he's an Irish abbot who went to Scotland as a missionary and to spread Christianity to the Picts. You know, the Picts are the ancient inhabitants of the Highlands, northern Scotland. The Romans talked about seeing them, and supposedly the name Pict means paint, and they're the painted ones because they either tattooed their bodies or they covered themselves in blue woad. They're Celts.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So he goes to bring Christianity to them, and I guess kind of metaphorically drive the stakes out, because he's kind of like the Scottish version of St. Patrick,
Okay.
or at least analogous. Although it's a gross oversimplification, but it's enough to know that he was wandering around Scotland, performing miracles, making converts, and establishing abbeys.
But this is St. Columba, so he's like, hey, just one more thing.
Just one more thing. No, that's St. Columba.
I
not
know,
Columbo.
close enough.
And this is in the 500s CE.
Okay.
On August 22nd, 565, he was traveling along the River Ness when he learns that a local Pict has been killed by some sort of water beast in the river.
Oh.
He looks at the body and places his staff across the chest, and the guy jumps up whole and unharmed and alive. So
It's a miracle.
He does a miracle. He raises this guy from the dead. So then Columbus says to himself, he says, well, I just bitch slapped death. Let's see about this wee beastie in the river then. And he orders
I'm on a roll.
I'm on a roll. And he orders one of his converts to swim across the river, which he obediently does. He gets out into the middle of the river when up out of the water rises a beast. Description missing. There's no fucking description of this beast.
Just a beast.
A beast comes up out of the water, and it starts to swim towards the convert. But from the shore, Columba makes the sign of the cross and proclaims, "Go no further." And as if held back by invisible bonds or slamming into a force field, the beast could not approach any further, after which point it sank down and was restricted, presumably to the loch. Although we only assume that it was restricted because for the next 1,500 years, no one fucking mentions the thing. No sightings, no recorded mention at all for 1,500 years.
He's a very shy monster. He finally got the courage to come up and say hello to somebody. Was denied and just never came back again. Never returned.
Now, the story of St. Columba versus the river monster is not unique. At the time, every would-be saint worth their vestments had a story about fighting a river or water monster. It was practically one of the prerequisites to being a saint at the time, especially a Celtic saint. And but however, that's the earliest mention of the monster, so that's where it comes from.
That's the earliest and only mention for hundreds of years.
For over 1,000 years.
Wow.
So yeah, like I said, no monster sightings for the next 1,500 years. But then in the late 1800s, there are two mentions of people seeing something weird in the loch. One of them comes from either 1871 or 1872. Unreliable narrator already.
Right.
And it's a man who saw an object churning up the water in the lake, and he described it looking like an upturned boat. However, he didn't say shit about this until the 1930s in the middle of the Loch Ness Monster craze. So
Oh, I saw the monster back when I was a kid.
So technically, that still doesn't count as a mention of it happening in the 1800s.
No,
it's
that's
like
retroactive. Yeah, that doesn't count.
But then in 1888, a local man, Alexander MacDonald of Abercon, which is a small village on the western shore of the loch, he reports that He reports to the Loch Ness water bailiff, and water bailiff is like the sheriff of the lake or the loch, like his jurisdiction. Anything that happens in the water, his problem. His
water
headache.
bailiff.
Water
I
bailiff.
like that.
He reports to the water bailiff that he had seen a stubby-legged creature looking somewhat like a giant salamander about 50 yards from shore.
Stubby-legged.
That looked kind of like a giant salamander. And then nothing is seen or reported for another 45 years.
So, all right. So he saw the legs of this thing that was in the water.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is about 50 yards from shore. Well, it says 50 yards from shore, but actually it doesn't specify whether that means 50 yards in the water or on land. Because as we're going to find out, there's some early sightings of the creature where it's on land and not in the water.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, so 45 years go by. No one's talking about this monster. But then in 1933, there's this road that already existed. It was actually built to facilitate the construction of the canal project almost 100 years earlier. Actually, over 100 years earlier. In 1933, the road was upgraded. And so it was like widened and like more cars start to travel. Before that, it was probably just like a kind of like a dirt track road. And now it's like, no, this is now an official highway. So people start traveling on this road. And after people start driving this road, suddenly sightings of the Loch Ness Monster start to happen basically overnight.
Now, in defense of, let's pretend this is maybe real, the Loch Ness Monster, you get a lot more eyes on the lake.
Yeah,
so it makes sense that a hidden monster might be seen more often. Okay.
Then, on April 15th, 1933, a man and his wife were driving along the loch when they saw what looked like, quote, a whale-like creature rolling about in the water. Their account was published on May 2nd in the Inverness Courier, and it contained this description. Quote, I'm not even gonna try to do a Scottish accent. The creature disported itself, rolling and plunging for fully a minute, its body resembling that of a whale, and the water cascading and churning like a swimming cauldron. Soon, however, it disappeared in a boiling mass of foam. Both onlookers confessed that there was something uncanny about the whole thing, for they realized that here was no ordinary denizen of the depths, because apart from its enormous size, the beast, in taking the final plunge, sent out waves that were big enough to have been caused by a passing steamer.
Wow.
Years later, in an interview, the wife, Aldi McKay, her name is Aldi, she admits that she was familiar with the tales of a large beast being in the loch before the event. So even though nobody had really seen it, they still knew the story of St. Columba. And
it was a local legend.
It was a local legend, yeah, but there's no no one's writing about it.
I find it noteworthy that it's shaped like a whale and not like something with a long neck.
Yeah.
Like I always imagine like an apatosaurus or brontosaurus, those long necks stuck on the end of a whale shaped body. But we haven't gotten there yet.
We haven't gotten there
the
yet.
Evolution has yet to happen.
A few months later, on July 22nd, another husband and wife team were driving along the road, and they would also see the creature. But this time it was not in the water. It was crossing the road.
Oh.
They described it as having a large body, about 4 feet high and about 25 feet long.
It's a baby Nessie.
It had a wavy, long, narrow neck.
Okay.
Slightly thicker than an elephant's trunk.
Okay.
And as they were getting close to it, it saw them. It starts going towards the loch, and it leaves a trail of broken undergrowth in its wake. The driver said that it was, quote, the nearest approach to a dragon or prehistoric animal that I have ever seen in my life.
Now we're getting to the description of what
And
I
they
would
said it had a
imagine.
long neck which moved up and down in a manner of a scenic railway.
What?
I don't know. Maybe like
It's very
windy,
poetic.
just windy. Yeah. And
Okay, all right.
oh no. Okay, no, never mind. A scenic railway. I do know this.
What?
It's an early roller coaster.
Oh.
Scenic railways.
Okay.
And so it would have some hills that weren't as steep as a regular roller coaster. So you would take this little train car and it would go up,
I've
and then
seen
it would just
photos of these old ones.
That's a scenic. So what they're saying is that
Okay.
its neck is wavy. It's got up and down. Up and down, kind of like a little roller coaster hill. That's what it is.
Okay, got it. Good
Thank
one.
you, Defunct Land on YouTube. I learned that from them a long
Very
time ago.
nice. Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Okay. It had a body that was fairly big with a high back, and if there were any feet, they didn't see them. It must have been like a web kind of foot, so maybe like a flipper.
Mm.
And as for tail, it says, I cannot say, as it moved so rapidly. And then when we got to the spot, it had probably disappeared into the loch. So by the time they drove up to where it was gone.
Okay.
On August 4th, the Inverness Courier ran the story, and it is from this article that we first get the title of the Loch Ness Monster.
Mm-hmm.
It's in this August 4th Inverness Courier story. Then, November 12th, 1933, the first photographic evidence of the Loch Ness Monster happens. A gentleman named Hugh Gray was walking his Labrador Retriever along the shore of the loch when he captured the first photographic evidence of the monster. It depicted some sort of animal twisting in the water, and many skeptics said it was probably an otter or a swan or maybe even Gray's dog itself. Believers said it was the beast. Although the original negative of the picture was lost to history, a few lantern slides that were contact positives from the original negatives were found in 1963. And when projected onto a large enough screen, it was clear to see that the monster was in fact, what do you think the monster was?
Some large animal. Well, log. It was a log.
Actually, it was an otter, just like the skeptics
Oh.
originally guessed. It was an otter that was rolling in the water in a very characteristic way that otters do. And there are otters in the loch.
Oh, there are. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Pretty small.
Over the next several years, the Loch Ness Monster becomes a world-famous celebrity. It's like world news. Everybody's talking about it. I mean, it's famous.
This is what I don't understand. Like, why did this one get so popular?
Well, the Yeti got huge too a little
guess,
later.
Yeah, maybe
It's
everyone
like-
was thirsty for this kind of a thing.
We were still exploring the world, and there was still a
Yeah.
lot to find. This was still a few years before the coelacanth was found.
Was like the Scottish Tourism Board involved?
Not directly, but not to jump too far ahead, but
Okay.
there might be some.
I'm just
tourism involved.
I'm speculating ahead of time. That'll be the analysis part
It's
of this
also,
episode.
film reels. People are now going to the movies and seeing news reels.
Okay.
And so world news is going around, so
Okay.
people like in a movie theater in like New York, for example, could like see a newsreel that then talked about this crazy thing happening in Scotland.
Meanwhile, in the old country on the highlands of Scotland,
Hey,
Nessie.
Dateline, you're up. Adolf Hitler scares the shit out of everybody, and there's a monster in a lake. Yeah, that's what's going on. And now you have photographs. So now you have photographic evidence that starts to happen. So people are like, So yeah, it catches
Okay.
everybody's imagination.
Got it. Okay.
This brings us to the most famous piece of Loch Ness evidence, a photograph that would become the official image of the creature. A photograph that is as important to Nessie believers as the Patterson-Gimlin film is to Sasquatch believers. And as we will find out, it's just as fucking fake. But first, dive for bones.
Glug, 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 glug. Splash sound effect.
Did you grow up with a lack of parental supervision?
Do you know all the lyrics to The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
Remember Mayor McCheese and the Fry Guys?
Have an inexplicable love for the California Raisins?
Can you remember Madonna's original phase?
Then you might be a part of the Doom generation.
Laugh until you cry with us each week as we stumble blindly through the memories of the movies
And other random things.
that doomed us to be the salty, sarcastic, sardonic ladies you want to hang with.
You know us, you love us, you can't fucking live without us.
Doom Generation, available everywhere you find podcasts.
Do you like beer?
Of course you do.
Do you like good food?
You better believe it.
Then we have the show for you.
It's the Hoppy Trails podcast.
I'm Nick.
I'm Travis, and on each episode of Hoppy Trails, we invite you to come along on our journey to explore craft beverages and the foods that accompany them.
Check out Hoppy Trails on hoppytrailspod.com or listen wherever you find your podcasts. Connect with us on Instagram at hoppytrailspod or reach out to hoppytrailspod@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you.
Come travel the Hoppy Trails with us, and remember to always say yes to the hoppy ending.
Cheers.
All right. Well, that's been a dive for bones if ever I heard
We're
one.
coming back to the surface.
Blub, blub, blub. Whoa! How long can you hold your breath, Cody? Because boy, my lungs are flopping here.
I think I held my breath. The answer is however long that ad break was.
That's pretty good. See, I held my breath less time, so I'm not sure how that happened. I resurfaced in the middle of the last. I was trying to be quiet about it. I didn't want to talk over the
Splash,
ad.
splash.
Anyway, welcome back. Those were some bones. I believe it was pretty dark.
Maybe
down
we found.
there.
Yeah, it's pretty dark. We'll find out how dark in just a little bit here. But before that, so before the break, I teased the most famous photograph of the Loch Ness monster.
In the meantime, I, like all you dear listeners, have brought it up, and I've got it on my laptop here. and I'm
this is
looking at
what
it.
this is called, the surgeon's photograph.
Okay, for those of you who are in a car or don't have internet access at the moment, I will describe it to you. Very grainy. You can see. Yeah, right. So the photograph is of the water. It's somebody above the water looking down on it from pretty high up. It's not taken from a boat. It's pretty clear. It's looking down. You can see the ripples and stuff. And there in the middle is a silhouetted object. It definitely has a dinosaur look to it. Again, it's just silhouetted. It's backlit. And it's got like a long neck, kind of giraffe-ish, but it goes straight up and then angles forward and then has like a kind of a pointy top to its head. Yeah, you know what? Cody's holding up his hand. It looks like a shadow puppet. Yeah, it totally looks like a shadow puppet head. And then there's a little bit of a butt to it that sticks out about as far as its head goes above the
Almost
water.
kind of looks like a swan, don't it?
Yeah, very swanny, very swanny. And
Okay,
I
so-
almost think I see a little glowing eye, but I think that's just a hot pixel. And,
So
there it is. Yeah.
On April 21st, 1934, the Daily Mail published a photograph allegedly taken by London-based gynecologist Robert Kenneth Wilson.
London-based gynecologist.
Robert Kenneth Wilson, Mr. Wilson. He claimed that he was looking at the loch when he saw a creature breach its head and neck above the water. He quickly fired off 4 shots with his camera, but only 2 of the shots came out, and one of them seemingly shows the what Garth just described. It's a swan-like neck and head sticking above the surface of the water. This photograph quickly became one of the most famous pictures in the world.
Wow.
And because Wilson...
It's not very good, though, is it?
No. Because Wilson was a respected British gynecologist and surgeon, his story was pretty much believed. Or at least had credibility. Like, yeah, this guy's on the level. And the picture has been known as the surgeon's photo ever since, because it's probably
better than the gynecologist's
picture of the Loch Ness Monster.
I thought the guy's name was Surgeon when you said it's the surgeon photo. No, it's from the guy who is a surgeon.
Yeah.
For the rest of this episode, we're going to call this the gynecologist photo.
The gynecologist photo of the monster in the wet...
Of the wet monster.
The wet monster. But here's the thing. The surgeon did not take the picture.
Oh.
And it does not show the Loch Ness Monster. Hell, it might not even been taken on the loch for all we know.
Yeah, you can't really tell what water it is.
Right, it's a close-up. You don't even see the shoreline. Right, well, that's a crop picture. The original does show the shoreline, so...
Okay.
Okay, but who took the photo, and what is it really? Enter Marmaduke Wetherell. Garth, I'm sending you a picture.
This is a real person. Marmaduke.
I just sent you a picture.
All right.
Of Marmaduke Wetherell.
All right, I'm gonna look up this picture Cody just sent me.
Wetherell.
Oh, well, I believe anything this guy says.
He has the crazed eyes of a madman. So and he's got a monkey.
Marmaduke Wetherell is definitely someone I would want to be friends with. He's got a hat and a beard and a monkey on his shoulder, and he has the eyes of a.
He's making like the same expression as the monkey.
Yeah,
he's shocked.
He has like Rasputin eyes.
Okay, so
Marmaduke Wetherell.
Marmaduke Wetherell.
Okay,
he's a South African actor, big game hunter, adventurer, and all around air quote personality.
This is a guy who just oozes adventure.
A man who could only exist in the 1930s.
Yeah, this is a friend of Indiana Jones.
Yeah, or he's the guy that like has
Actually, this is the guy that traps Indiana Jones in a
This is
temple.
the guy that's been hired to beat Indy
yeah, totally.
to the treasure. Yeah, okay. So
he's not the main bad guy. He's like a sub-villain that gets dispatched halfway through the
probably eaten
movie.
by the Loch Ness Monster.
I think so, yeah.
So
Marmaduke Wetherell.
In 1933, during the first wave of sightings, he makes his way to Loch Ness and claimed that he would hunt the beast because he's a big game hunter.
Oh, yeah.
He talks a big game, and he kills a big game. So the newspapers and world waited with bated breath as Marmaduke kept giving updates on his search, mainly through the Daily Mail.
He's just like walking around the shoreline looking.
He claims that he kept claiming that he was on the beast's trail and would soon have it. To back this up, he produced photographs and casts of footprints he claimed belonged to the Loch Ness Monster.
Okay.
This evidence was examined by experts at the Museum of Natural History, and they found that they had a match already in the museum.
Oh, what was it?
Garth. I was going to say, Garth, any guesses on what it was?
Well, if it's something that had flippers, and it's something that he was faking.
It wasn't flippers, it was a footprint.
Golly, an elephant? I don't know.
Close.
Why would they have an elephant? What was it?
So,
a cow?
It turns out it's the footprint of a hippopotamus.
Oh, that's good.
Remember, Marmaduke was a big game hunter from South Africa.
So
in his possession...
Did he have a stuffed foot?
He had a silver-lined ashtray made out of the foot of a fucking hippopotamus.
So he was just carrying this ashtray along and squishing it into the sand and then taking patterns.
Much like somebody wearing a big foot made out of plywood strapped to their shoes.
Yeah. I could totally picture him doing this with his ashtray while he's smoking a cigarette, and then he just smashes it into the
So the
sand.
hoax, this gets exposed.
Okay.
And he'd been, he was using it to drive publicity and his own fame.
Oh, of course.
And but one wonders what like the end game was. Because at some point he's gonna have to produce some kind of dead animal, right?
Or say that he had an encounter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what the end game was. Maybe it was just to get himself publicity and
Well, either way, the Daily Mail exposes him as a fraud, and he's disgraced and angry.
When the Daily Mail exposes you as a fraud, you know you did a really bad job.
I think back then they were probably more reputable than they are now.
Okay. I was going to say, it's kind of like the National Enquirer exposing someone. It's like, oh, really? Okay.
Right. It's because Weekly World News doesn't discredit the existence of Bat Boy.
It doesn't discredit the existence of anything.
No. So decades later, his son-in-law, Christian Sperling, would spill the beans to the Sunday Telegraph in an interview that was mostly ignored until it was reprinted in a book that exposed the whole incident as a hoax in the 90s.
Wow.
So, as it turns out, Marmaduke Wetherell vowed that he would get revenge on his critics by pulling off the perfect hoax regarding the monster. Supposedly saying, they want a monster, I'll give them a monster.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Just with that attitude, I'm on his side again. Okay, what
So
did he do?
he has his son-in-law Sperling purchase a toy submarine from Woolworths. Stay out of the Woolworths. I guess
Is that just the one Woolworth or all of them?
Now, I'm assuming at this point he means that he got it from a Woolworths catalog, because Woolworths is an American company.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they,
Did they ship overseas?
I don't know. Well, I don't know if they had a location in Scotland or not. And if they didn't and it came from a catalog, all the better, because nobody's going to know that he has, nobody's going to expect this thing to even exist because they don't sell them there.
Right.
But yeah, so it's a toy submarine.
Okay.
And then he uses plastic wood for like model making and crafts the long neck and dinosaur-like head.
I wonder how he counterweighted it so it wouldn't flop over.
They figured it out. They got weights and stuff that also kept the submarine body under the water, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I think his Sperling's young son, helped in this whole endeavor. So they end up with like a little conspiracy. It's like it's Wetherell, it's Sperling and his son, this one other guy who's like a local dude who's in on it, and so they build this little model, they test it in a pond, and then they do take it to the shore of Loch Ness. So it actually was in Loch Ness.
Okay. What did they do about it then? Did they take photos?
They took the photos.
Okay.
But then they said they heard the water bailiff approaching in his boat, so they sank the model. And it is presumably still down there at the bottom of the loch to this day.
Now, is this the model that the gynecologist took the photo of, but
Yeah.
really he didn't?
He didn't. We're going to get to
Okay.
him. He's coming up in a second.
Okay.
But technically, this could mean there is a monster in Loch Ness that is this model of a monster from 1933. It might still be down
know.
there.
That's what I wonder.
It's probably buried under feet of, tons
It's
of feet of sediment.
sediment,
Yeah, now.
probably.
But just think that like technically there's a monster down there, maybe. So, but Marmaduke knew that if he is the one that presents the pictures, everyone's going to know it's fake, right? Because he's a fraud.
Oh, you're right. His credibility is wrecked.
One of those conspirators happened to know the surgeon who was a friend of his,
Okay,
who also supposedly was like really big into playing practical jokes.
Okay.
So he's
well,
like-
I mean, he's a gynecologist, so no, I don't know.
Gotta have a sense of humor. So they take the pictures, but then they give the film to Wilson, the surgeon. He then takes it into a local chemist in Inverness, gets the plates developed.
Okay.
Oh my God, it's this monster.
Now,
And then he sells the photos to the Daily Mail.
Is Marmaduke doing this strictly just to hoax everybody? Because it's not even his reputation anymore. He just really wants to
Well,
get one over
also
on
like they don't reveal the
everyone.
hoax. They keep it a secret. They sell the pictures of the Daily Mail. So he's like
Right.
getting money from them. So basically it's like just his own like, I know the truth.
I see.
Like, yeah, he's like the
It's
evil
a
genius. It's a pure like
because in this show in the Least Haunted we've found two reasons to hoax. One, profit. Two, just to fuck with people.
just to fuck with
and
people.
that's the one, the pure one.
But he is making money off of it. But he's
Oh,
also
okay.
like trying to make. He's like basically trying to. It's his revenge.
It's a revenge. Yeah, it's a revenge hoax. All right.
Have you seen Spider-Man: Far From Home?
Which one was that? What
Mysterio.
Mysterio? Oh yeah.
Basically,
That was a
yeah.
good one.
So
Donnie Darko, right?
yeah. So in a
Yeah.
roundabout way, Spider-Man: Far From Home. That's
Yeah.
what's happening here.
Yeah,
He's
okay,
getting
okay.
revenge. It's revenge. Okay. So. So nobody like talks about it, and it stays a secret until 1976 when Sperling, the guy who made the model, he like gives an interview and talks about it, but nobody fucking gives a shit. However, even though it was a hoax, it was revealed to be a hoax later. The damage was already done because there was a convincing photograph of something in the loch. Loch Ness Monster fever continued to spread in various sightings, and eyewitness accounts and photographic evidence continued and continues to appear ever since.
It just snowballs even when
Yeah, at one point they were
discredited.
estimating, like, it's
we've
about-
seen this in just about every
about like on
conspiracy.
average about 13 sightings per year.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, how many of those have photographic evidence?
I don't know. But
Okay.
just on average, they said since like the 1930s, on average, about 13 claimed sightings a year.
Well, and when I did an image search online to find this, we had to go through it, and Cody pointed out the one that we're talking about here because a lot of people have recreated this.
Once they knew like how it was done, like people have rebuilt the model.
Oh,
And
totally.
and recreated it and gotten the exact same effect and look.
Better quality images too.
And remember how I said when I said that the photo we said it was cropped, and so it was like a close up.
Right.
The uncropped version, you can see the opposite shoreline of the loch, and from that, and knowing how wide the loch is on average, they could deduce that it actually wasn't that far offshore. So that it has to be a smaller object filmed up close.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And that's probably why it's cropped here, so you don't have a site. There's no banana for scale.
Yeah,
here,
no
right?
banana for scale.
Okay.
In the 1940s, that's when they would affectionately name it Nessie for the first time. And once the creature had a cute nickname, it's game over, man. It's
Yeah,
game
now
over.
you got stuffed animals.
You got merchandising.
This is the Baby Yoda
You're
of the 1940s.
slapping on lunch boxes
yeah.
and you're selling it. You're selling it.
And this is when the tourism board gets into it. Hey, visit Loch Ness. Maybe you'll see a monster.
Yeah. But interestingly, very few of the creature descriptions early on are the same. Like every time somebody sees it, they're describing a different creature. So one would have to conclude that there were actually several different kinds.
Yeah, there's a whale monster.
Yeah.
There's a not a brontosaurus. What is it called? A plesiosaur?
We're going to get to that.
Okay.
But as we go on, I'm going to kind of demonstrate how each of these variations has a plausible explanation.
Okay.
I'm not going to go into every eyewitness account and piece of evidence because that would take too fucking long. But instead, now we're going to just pivot and talk about what's really going on in a segment I call, What's All This Then?
Cue, what's all this then music? What's all then this music is played? So what is all this then?
All sightings of a monster in Loch Ness are the result of either misidentification of normal animals inhabiting or known to frequent the loch, misidentification of debris on the loch, misidentification of natural phenomena that the unique geology of Loch Ness can produce, wishful thinking, and hacking of the human brain, aka psychology.
And that one time it was all of them, and you had like an otter on a piece of driftwood with a rainbow, and a person who was really hopeful.
No,
all at once.
it turns out it was just some beavers with some chainsaws.
Sweet. Beaver with a chainsaw.
The first thing to talk about is the animal life of the loch. Now, some true believers like to posit that Nessie could be a relic plesiosaur that somehow survived since dinosaur times and found itself in the loch.
Okay.
Bullshit!
Bullshit, I say.
But
But why is that bullshit, Cody?
all right. I don't know exactly where to begin on this one, so let's start with plesiosaurs. A plesiosaur was a marine reptile with a long neck that existed in the Jurassic period and went extinct 174 million years ago. So it isn't enough to say that a plesiosaur had to survive the KT extinction event of 65 million years ago, but it actually would have had to survive almost 100 million years before that, between the end of the Jurassic and...
Oh, so there weren't even plesiosaurs when
65,
the dinosaurs...
Exactly. They'd already been
Okay.
gone for 100 million years.
All right, except for this one very small family.
Very small, inbred as shit family.
Yeah, no, it's just
Okay.
it is multiplying.
So it's preposterous, all right?
Okay.
Although plesiosaur fossils have been found in the rocks of the Highlands.
Okay.
Remember that 174...
But that would have been Pangea.
174 million years ago, Scotland was not where it is now.
Right.
And sure as fuck, Loch Ness certainly didn't exist then either.
Okay.
How old is Loch Ness?
I don't know. How old is Loch Ness?
Glad you asked. As I mentioned, Loch Ness exists in the Great Glen Fault line, but the loch itself was carved out by successive glaciers, and prior to 11,000 years ago, it was a glacier field.
Okay,
So
very
if a
new.
plesiosaur had survived long enough to get into Loch Ness, it would have had to have waited until about 10,000 years ago, which is the last time the loch had any connection to the sea beyond the river.
Could plesiosaurs walk around on land at all?
No.
Oh,
They
well,
could not.
and
they are purely aquatic.
Okay, so...
And no more than a whale could.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Around 10,000...
Didn't whales used to have legs?
Yes, but I'm talking like a whale now.
Okay, got it.
Okay, around 10,000 years ago, and to the southeast of Loch Ness, is Glen Roy. When they talk about Glen, I keep saying the word Glen, that means like a valley.
Right.
Right, a long valley. So Glen Roy.
This particular Glen happens to be named Roy.
Roy. This is Roy.
This is Roy.
He's a Glen.
This is Roy.
10,000 years ago,
Uh-huh.
Glen Roy was not a glen, but was actually Loch Roy. It was a large glacial lake.
So what was once LaCroix is now
No, Glenroy.
Glen. Okay.
It was a large glacial lake. So there's like an ice dam that's holding all this water back. And for some reason, it bursts. And so virtually in a single day, pretty much, that loch drained in the direction of Loch Ness. And when it got there, it then overran the lake and then pretty much flooded the River Ness all the way to the North Sea.
Wow.
Some argue that at this point, Nessie and some other plesiosaurs swim against this flood of water.
Oh, because that's a connection for a
Yeah.
short period of time as it drains into the sea. You
to
can
go
be swimming
against the flow
upstream
of this water and get
Yes.
into the loch.
Oh yeah.
Or that somehow when the water like came back, like receded like a tsunami,
It's sloshing back and
it
forth.
dragged seawater in. Right.
Mhm.
Now, it's
Alright.
true
Would
that
that
sea
happen?
creatures have found their way into Loch Ness from time to time. There are
Oh.
occasional seals who come up through the Caledonian Canal in the River Ness and get into the loch.
Okay.
And on a few occasions, Baltic sturgeon,
Baltic.
sturgeon,
Oh, okay.
which is a sturgeon is an armored fish that can grow over 10 feet long, sometimes 14 feet long. It's where they get caviar from. But there have been times when they've been found in the River Ness. Like actually,
But
there's
those are all
documented.
going through the canal.
Yeah.
So before the canal, there's no way sea life could have gotten into
Just
the
the river. It would have been the river. The canals are put
Okay.
there to equalize the water level, and so you can take boats from the river up into the loch
Okay.
through a series of locks.
Right.
Which I did.
Through a series of locks into the loch.
And that's what happened is when I went there, we started in Inverness, and we took the boat up the River Ness,
Oh, that's
and
so
then
cool.
went through these series of locks into Loch Ness.
Wow.
So anyway, it would have been this really narrow window of time for these plesiosaurs to get in there.
Is that because the current river is just too small for a big ol'?
I think so.
Okay.
I guess. I don't know. How do we know the river even existed back then? So, however, there have been core samples that have been taken from the sediment at the bottom of the lake.
Oh.
They see they can see all kinds of shit in the sediment layers in these core samples, including they can see the Chernobyl event. Like there's a
No
radioactive.
kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so they can look back in this record of geologic time in this mud sediment, and they find.
Do they just
No-
stab a tube into the ground
They
and then
drop
pull
a weighted,
it up?
A big weighted
Nice.
pipe, and it sinks into the mud, and they pull it up, and then it's like designed to split open in half.
And then
they
you can just look and
Yeah.
lower is
kind of like tree
earlier.
rings. Yeah.
Very cool.
That's called the law of stratigraphy. The further down you go, the older the thing is,
Mm-hmm.
unless it's been disturbed by humans.
There must be certain instances where
There's like
storms and stuff and
storm like
earthquakes
landslides,
mess it
earthquakes, but
up,
that
yeah.
also leaves other there's ways you can figure that out.
I see.
So they can see all this evidence of what's been going on in this lake, going all the way back to 10,000 years ago.
Wow.
There is no salt water in there.
Oh,
So the water
so
didn't come
there you
back
go.
up. The
So
water
there-
has always been flowing out.
It was never connected to the ocean in that time.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least not in the last 10,000 years. Okay, but let's suppose this marine reptile did get into the loch. It would then need to adapt to fresh water.
Oh yeah.
Although, recently in the news, they found fossils of a plesiosaur in the Moroccan Sahara Desert.
Oh.
And they know that where this plesiosaur fossil was found at the time would have been fresh water. So now all these people are like, see, there could be a plesiosaur in a freshwater lake. It's like that hardly equals the other.
No, but it I really want to be, because you're so adamantly this isn't a plesiosaur. I want to be on team plesiosaur here.
Okay.
I'm like, well, that's good. So maybe plesiosaurs were all right with fresh water. Okay.
And if they weren't, they had to adapt. Either way, you can't get around the fact that you need a breeding population. So
Right,
everything
you need-
that a single
okay.
plesiosaur had to do and overcome to get to Loch Ness, several had to do at the same time as well.
Maybe there was just like a salt lick on one side of the lake,
Well, we know there's no salt in the water. They took the core samples.
Oh,
There's no
that's
salt
true.
there. Okay.
just above the water line. Okay.
So-
Anyway, continue.
Plesiosaurs also breathe air. So if you have a breeding population of these, oh yeah, I forgot to mention they're like several meters long. These are big creatures.
Yeah.
Right. Although there were lots of different species, it's a whole family, it's a whole genera of these marine reptiles that are the plesiosaurs. The longest of which is like several meters, and the shortest is probably about like 10 feet.
Okay.
But still, that's a big fucking thing.
Yeah.
So if you have a population of those that have to keep surfacing for air, you're going to see them a hell of a lot more often than you do.
No matter how big the lake is.
So there's been scientific analysis of the water in the loch that has counted zooplankton, which are essential to any food chain which will support fish.
Okay, so anytime there's fish, there's zooplankton.
It's like you have to go all the way down. Yeah, right. And they
that
found
gets
that
eaten
there's
by everybody. Okay.
Yeah, and they found that there's just not enough zooplankton in the loch to support a fish population big enough to support one giant plesiosaur, let
Got
alone
it.
several, not even just plesiosaurs, but like large creatures of that size. If they had to estimate based on what the zooplankton, they could extrapolate like what that could support.
Right.
They say there'd be less than 17 tons of fish in this entire lake.
That's not enough for the diet of a plesiosaur.
Yes.
Okay.
And part of this has to do with the water clarity of Loch Ness. Like I said, there's 6 rivers that feed into the loch, and they come out of the surrounding highlands, and the soil of these rivers pass through very peaty soil. So it's picking up all this peat, tannins, and so forth that it carries into the lake. And although peat can make an excellent material from which to give a Scotch whiskey its distinctive smoky flavor, it does shit all for clarity of a loch. Using a large white dish dropped down into the water, they can measure. That's how you measure clarity. It's like however far down this disc goes, and you can still see it, and you know the size of the disc, so then you can count. You do all this math, and yeah. Anyway, you can figure the clarity of that. They use this for Lake Tahoe, and you can see that disc for a fucking long time in Lake Tahoe.
Very clear lake.
In Loch Ness, however, it's about 9 feet, and then it's gone.
Ooh, that's way spookier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So light cannot penetrate beyond that depth into Loch Ness. This translates to there not being enough sunlight to generate green algae, and green algae is what supports zooplankton, which sustain the fish, which sustain larger fish, which in turn would sustain the plesiosaurs or any other large creature for that matter. So there's just not, the food chain just doesn't exist to support it.
I'm starting to doubt this Loch Ness monster exists.
Far further on that note, the water at the bottom of the loch is incredibly cold and pitch fucking black.
Yeah.
Which would mean that any creature that is living in there would also need to eat a lot of something to maintain a metabolism that would keep it warm. Unless it's basking in in the Highland Scottish sun, in which case you could see it a hell of a lot more often. Or it has to have a fatty layer of insulation, which also would mean it have to eat all the time.
Yeah, that would take a lot to maintain.
Yeah, right. So it's not down there. But then also it begs the question of how can the creature fucking navigate in pitch black?
Well, it's got a little lamp. It's like a lamp.
If it was using sonar or echolocation, surely we would be able to pick that noise up.
Oh, yeah, I guess so.
We'll find out. Sonar has had a lot of play in Loch Ness, but that comes later. I'm getting ahead of myself. And here's something else about plesiosaurs. Their physiology and the way their bones are put together means it would be physically impossible for them to raise their necks above the water in the way that Nessie is presented as doing. They can move their necks side to side, but the spine could not go up and down.
They don't bend that way.
They can go down, but they couldn't go up. Yeah.
Not a plesiosaur. All right, you convinced me. It's
so definitely not a fucking plesiosaur.
Okay.
And for that matter, no lake monster anywhere is a plesiosaur either. I'm going to say they bring it up for a lot of places. Plesiosaurs.
Okay, so that means any lake monster anywhere, it's not going to be a plesiosaur.
It's just not going to be a plesiosaur, man. There's just too much. I mean, it's just such a huge fucking leap that they have to survive that long. And that's when everybody always brings up those goddamn coelacanths. The fucking coelacanth. 1938, off the shore of South Africa, some fishermen catch a coelacanth, which they had thought had been extinct for about 74 million years, but they've actually been around since they're like early fish. They still have limbs instead of fins, right?
And they're still around.
They're still around. And
so is it so hard to believe that a plesiosaur?
But they're not really still around. It's not the same. It's like they've changed over. There have been small changes.
They have evolved a little bit.
Yeah,
okay.
It's not the same thing. And also, they're not a giant fucking apex predator. They're a fish that just kind of hangs out at the bottom and just gets big. It just takes a long time to grow. You know, it's not a very active creature.
Okay.
Anyway, so it's like if you're watching a documentary about Loch Ness Monster, you could bet money that at some point they're going to bring up that fucking coelacanth every goddamn time.
I called up Cody yesterday and I was like, hey, do you want to watch this movie with me? He's like, I'm watching a Loch Ness Monster.
I'm watching a Loch doc.
Did the Loch doc bring up the
It did.
coelacanth?
It did. Although a lot of my research that's in here, actually, it was a pretty good doc. It did a lot of, it's like if we had a TV show at a budget, it's kind of was like least haunting.
It was one dude explaining a whole bunch of stuff, and the other one dude going, "Whoa, cool."
No, I mean that it was like a bunch of. It was all skeptical. It was all scientific.
Interesting.
And, okay, so So if it's not a plesiosaur,
Yeah.
what other animals already present in the lake could be responsible?
Hmm.
I already mentioned the possibility of sturgeon.
Yep.
There was a case of a woman who said that she had seen in the river a creature that looked like a crocodile. It had like corrugated back and stuff.
Ooh.
It turns out sturgeon. That's what a sturgeon looks
Oh,
like. They're
okay.
about 14 feet long.
And somebody thought it was an otter might be. That's
Yeah.
a contender as well.
Yeah, otters were a contender
Yeah.
as well. And seals that show up occasionally in the loch from time to time.
Right. Okay.
And those who are unfamiliar with those creatures would, if like you didn't know an otter did this groups of otters do this weird thing where they writhe around on the top.
Oh yeah, they roll. They do. They do those
right.
rolls.
Yeah. So if you didn't know that, and you saw that for the first time in a lake that's like,
and you're already thinking there's a
Yes.
monster in this lake. You're primed.
Mhm.
Your brain's primed.
okay. So beyond all that though, what if I told you it was birds?
Whenever you ask it in that way, then my response is always, well, my response would be
It's always fucking birds, Garth.
my response would be that
Mothman?
it'd have to be a lot of birds, wouldn't it?
Uh-huh.
Like do they flock to are there any birds that kind of land on each other and create super birds?
It's called a murmuration.
Oh, I guess that does happen.
when
It's called
birds-
murmuration.
When they all move together is one thing.
Oh, but we're talking about like birds flying in formation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Murmuration.
So there's this guy. His name is Dick Rayner.
This is the best episode for names.
Yeah. Marmaduke Weatherell and Dick Rayner.
All right.
So Dick Rayner, he's been investigating Loch Ness since he was 17.
Okay.
So like in the 1970s, he joins this group that calls itself the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau.
Okay.
And at that time, he caught like actual film evidence, like movie evidence of
Ooh.
some sort of creature moving in the water and leaving a distinct wake behind it.
Oh, can we find this? I want to see it.
For 14 years, he believed that he had seen Nessie and dedicated his life to trying to find more evidence of Nessie.
Wow.
Then, like I said, 14 years later, he sees the phenomenon again. Although this time, it's closer, and he was able to see what it really was. It was a family of mergansers, which are a type of water bird like a duck.
A duck!
Exactly.
It's like a family of ducks.
What must this have been like for him? Because he recognized it as a similar thing from before.
Yeah.
And then,
So what he was
it's
seeing, he said,
ducks.
was that these family of ducks would the ducks would kind of run on the surface of the water and kind of like a little bit, but not fully flap. And then they would stop and they would kind of slow down and it's like coast a bit in the water and it would make this distinctive wake. So what he thought was like a neck rising up and going down, that was the bird running these birds running together and then they dropped down.
So this isn't one bird running across the lake. It's a whole bunch
he said
together.
it was a family of them together.
Okay.
So he sees this and like it caused all of his belief to literally fly away like these birds. And then he dedicated
man.
his life to investigating and debunking evidence of the Loch Ness Monster.
Wow.
As either birds, local animals, or boats. So he starts going through all the evidence, like a lot of evidence that I didn't even mention.
So this guy he's a true believer, discovers that the thing that he saw that made him a believer isn't real, and then he flips around and goes like, all right, I'm going to debunk all of that.
He's like, yeah, if my thing wasn't real, like, and was something natural, then maybe these other things are natural too.
Good on him for not doubling down.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to take a core
Yeah.
thing that you believe and just throw it away based on new evidence and switch. And now he's going the other way with it. Wow.
So he has video evidence to like back this up. He's like, here's the thing I originally filmed. Here's the thing I filmed again later with
Nice.
the explanation. Here it
Nice.
is. I've been able to film it again and again. And then he also sees, like I mentioned, these things called murmurations, which is like when you ever see like the flock of blackbirds that are all moving together?
Oh yeah, and then the wind and they go whoosh whoosh.
Usually it's to escape a predator or for some
Beautiful.
other reason. That's called a murmuration. So he has captured on film these groups of other birds doing a murmuration at water level. And it does look like this thing that is like a neck and a head and it has like substance. And then it seemingly disappears because the birds disperse.
Yeah, and so
And at a distance, they're no
yeah.
longer, they're so small, they're not all together to make this big shape. So they just, it's gone.
that
And
is
so it
such
must
a
have gone under the water.
beautiful explanation. I like that
Right?
a lot. Yeah.
Okay. He was also able to solve another famous Nessie picture or debunk a famous Nessie picture. This one from 1955. It was the so-called McNabb photograph.
I'm going to look that up now.
As you're looking it up,
McNab?
I'll describe what it
Okay.
appears to show the two humps of some large creature in the bay below the famous and picturesque Urquhart Castle. Urquhart Castle is this like castle ruins that are right on the shore of Loch Ness. It's really picturesque. It's like,
Yeah, I see
yeah.
it. There's a that's this one, right?
Yep, that's the picture.
Okay, so yeah, there's a little castle on one side. It looks like the castle at the end of Monty Python on the Holy Grail, and then yeah, you get two little bumps. They're not sticking above the water more than a few feet, even though it's
Now,
a very big thing.
if you
So
look-
is this a murmuration?
No.
Oh, okay.
If you look at this picture, if you look further up on the picture,
Yeah.
you'll see about halfway up, and then again about a third of the way up past that, two other parallel lines.
Oh yeah, I see those. Yeah.
See those lines? Okay. So he noticed those lines as well. He realized that you could trace the lines that the humps
Oh,
are
it's
on.
a wake.
You could trace
and
the
a wave.
Yeah, you could trace the lines of the hump and those other two lines to an imaginary point where they would converge out of frame. And he deduced that it must be the wake from a boat. You don't see the other humps on the other direction because you're looking at that wake from a different direction.
Sure, and
Right?
it's one of those things where a wake will be a bulge in the
Yeah.
water, and if it gets high enough, it'll crest and then flop over, and that's
Yeah.
really what you're seeing here. Because when a wave goes all the way over, it's going to
So-
cast a shadow and be much darker than just the humps of water.
But see, this is a theory that he could actually test because we know the location. You can reframe the shot
yeah,
completely.
you could make a bunch of splashing and try to
You can do
recreate
this.
these wakes.
And so they went out with a boat and they did it.
Nice.
And you know what they found?
They could recreate it.
They could accurately and predictably recreate the exact same photograph
Good.
and prove that boat wakes in Loch Ness can take a long time to register after a boat has passed by.
Wow.
Which explains why so many sightings of humps or snake-like writhing are seen on the loch, seemingly when there's no boats close to where it happens. It's because the loch is so narrow that like in deep that just the nature of how it is that in the right conditions it could take a really long, it could be like
That
minutes
is-
later before the wake actually catches up to you.
That is fascinating. So the actual geography of the shape of the lake affects the way that ripples work in
Yeah.
the lake, which you'll give this
Yeah.
phenomenon. Oh wow. Okay.
Science.
Yeah.
So-
really.
Okay, so it's misidentified animals and boat wakes, right? Is that
Yeah.
all? No, there's more.
More.
Okay, remember how I mentioned that sonar had been used in the loch before?
Yes.
Okay, well, it has actually been used many times. Most famously in 1987, the Loch Ness Project, which is a organization, a private organization, they conducted an operation called Operation Deep Scan, in which they used a line of sonar-equipped boats spread across the loch, and they started at one end.
They just sweep.
They swept the entire loch in one direction, turned around and came back the other,
Yeah.
creating this sonar net. So if there was anything in there, they would have picked it up. They
And
would have
they're
gotten it.
also probably gathering data on the exact shape of the floor of the lake too.
Mhm. So Deep Scan was spearheaded by Adrian Shine, who is a fucking... he was in this documentary, and I've seen him in other documentaries too, because I knew about Deep Scan before this, because I used to be a true believer.
Right.
The man has a fucking magnificent beard. This is a Hall of Fame beard, if there ever was one. And he's probably the foremost expert on Loch Ness, or by now he's at least the person who's most familiar with the loch. Because although he spends most of his time looking for the Loch Ness Monster, he is not a true believer. Instead, he says that his primary goal is just to catalog and understand the biology and ecology of the loch. And if claiming to look for Nessie pays those bills and allows him to do so, then so be it.
Does
I
he
mean,
get funding for looking for
this
Nessie,
film
then?
crew went and paid for him to go out there and look around. And
Oh, so he just has like a gimmick, but he's also using that money to be a scientist.
he's a real scientist. He's a real scientist. He built a bathysphere and like went down. A bathysphere is like a diving.
Oh, like those old.
And he went down. Like, yeah, he got dropped down into the loch. He went down there with some students.
Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
So he's been at it for a fucking really long time.
Wow.
At least since the late 70s. So Operation Deep Scan, it failed to find any monster. However, it did find a bit of debris on the bottom of the loch, which, like, when they first found it, like, the press jumped on that. They found something at the bottom, and it's like, then they
Debris.
Yeah, then they swept it again. Like, no, whatever it is still there, and it's obviously some kind of pileup of debris.
Can you drop an anchor and poke it and try to pull it
They
up?
have dropped little ROVs, remote operated vehicles with
Oh, yeah.
lights down there. In the 1970s, they dropped a camera with a light on there, and They claim to have caught, this image that supposedly showed like this long-necked creature's body and stuff, but it's pretty clear that it's wood and stuff on the bottom of the lake. Not a plesiosaur, because again, we already explained why that's impossible.
You convinced me.
Okay. But it also gave them a great picture of the topography at the bottom of Loch Ness. What it showed was a relatively flat and even bottom with extremely steep sides. Essentially, Loch Ness is a very deep, very steep, long trough.
Okay.
Let me also add that they found no evidence of caves in which a plesiosaur monster could be hiding.
That was one of the things I was thinking of, actually.
Although they did find a few shipwrecks.
Whoa.
And they have recently found another shipwreck that I think comes up in Garth's Corner.
Oh, yeah, I guess that was a ship. Yeah.
Okay. So this unique shape.
I was imagining a pirate ship.
Yeah, no. Because remember I said that Loch Ness actually was part of a shipping lane. It was the Caledonian Canal. So they were running boats up and down. Which you think a lot of shipping boats going up and down this loch, do you think more people would see things in there at least before the road?
That's a good point. Yeah, it's not like no one was around before the road.
Yeah. So the unique shape was caused by glaciers, and it allows for some interesting effects. The loch is oriented in a northeast-southwest line, which along with that Great Glen Fault, it also happens to line up with the prevailing winds, effectively making Loch Ness and its basin a wind tunnel right off of the North Sea. So in the right conditions, the wind just comes howling through there. This wind visibly moves the top of the loch with it. You see it moving. And sometimes, though,
when you say the top of the loch,
like
you mean the water surface,
the water surface
level.
is visibly moving with the wind. The wind is blowing the water that way.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
However, occasionally people see objects moving against the wind up the loch.
What would that be?
And so you have to assume that if it's moving against the wind, it must have some kind of self-power.
I would
so
assume
it must be some kind of living thing, right?
Yeah.
Wrong.
I knew you were going to say that.
Okay, so because the lake is so deep, kind of like Lake Tahoe,
Right.
its temperature never rises above a certain point, but likewise never drops below a certain point as well, which means that, like Lake Tahoe, Loch Ness does not freeze in the winter. Instead, what happens is that the warmer top half of the lake and the colder bottom half of the lake remain separated into two distinct layers.
Okay.
When the wind on the top of the lake agitates the water, it creates waves. These waves, in turn, cause the two layers, like it eventually reaches down, to start to kind of churn and rock back and forth against each other. But they do not mix.
Okay. But it's
So-
both water. It's just temperature.
Yeah, temperature,
Okay.
yeah. So when the top water layer moves the top layer is moving in one direction, and then it sinks down, and then if you look at it from the side, it's like a big oblong circle. It's a cycle.
It
The water is
circles.
moving.
It circles. It's
Yeah.
making little
It's
sideways
yeah.
tornadoes.
In the direction that it is flowing, that top layer is moving, is actually opposite of where the direction the wind is going off in.
Oh, okay. So if something in the river had enough of it sticking way down, the current would be the opposite
And
direction of the wind.
As I said, that now you have these two
Okay.
distinct layers are being agitated together. It creates waves. And these waves they're underwater waves. They actually can be hundreds of feet tall.
Underwater waves.
That don't register on the top.
So it's okay. So not a wave as in a wave on the top, but like a wave through a medium.
Yeah. Inside.
So we're talking about the surface could be going one direction, but 10 feet,
you go down
50 feet down, the water could literally be moving the other
opposite
direction.
And
Got
at a pretty good clip as well.
Wow.
So this phenomenon is called a seiche.
Seiche.
They're underwater waves and currents. Adrian Shine from Operation Deep Scan, he's demonstrated and proved his theory that logs and other floating debris can be carried against the wind on these seiches. And not just that these things can move against the prevailing wind, but they can do it at a surprising speed as well.
Yeah, you could test that. Just throw some driftwood in when it's windy.
And he's done this. He demonstrated that logs and debris that get dumped into Loch Ness through one of the 6 rivers that flow into it,
Yeah.
these logs are then carried by the current of those rivers that has a lasting effect that pushes it out into the middle of the loch. It gets to the middle, it is now subject to the seiches.
Wow.
And then as it's going up and down through this current against the prevailing wind, these objects also twist and rotate.
I was just thinking you're going to be tumbled around because if your top part
imagine
is,
you have a log with the bottom of a tree with some roots sticking out of one end. It's moving against the thing, and then it rotates up, and now these roots breach the surface.
Yeah, and everything is going to be rolling.
It looks like a neck, and then it goes underwater.
Oh, man.
And he's demonstrated this by taking logs at random out into the lake and dropping them.
And they look like little Nessies
and
with their heads bobbing up.
Yeah, it really does.
That is great. Wow.
Mm-hmm. So this is demonstratable. And it's repeatable science.
Wow.
That they have done. It's like, no, this is okay.
Very convincing.
Which brings us to the final component of the Loch Ness Monster. Expectations, wishful thinking, and human psychology. There have been cognitive experiments carried out at Loch Ness where wooden poles have been partially submerged and anchored just offshore. This happens in this documentary that I watched. A scenario is set up where they trick people into looking in that direction. They had like a bagpiper out there playing, and they're out there filming him. So all these tourists start filming this bagpiper, right? This piper. Meanwhile, behind him, this post rises up out of the water and then sinks back into the water, right?
Okay.
Afterwards, they then interview the people who had witnessed this to see what they thought they had seen and to draw it.
Half of them are like, what? I was looking at the bagpiper, but the other half.
And of course, most people initially thought it was Nessie. Some even added details into their drawings that they made of it because they asked them to draw it. And these details were not part of the wooden post at all. But science needs a control and it needs repeatable results.
Right.
So the experiment was repeated, only this time in a location miles away with no related myths of a water monster.
So people aren't primed to expect to see
And of course,
Nessie here.
no one identified it as a monster. Everyone immediately looked at it and assumed it was either a stick, or in a few cases, they said it must be some kind of weird piece of machinery that's rising above the water. Donkagin.
Donkagin.
First you dance with the devil. Then you find out about Donkagin.
But this illustrates that expectations can shape or influence our experiences.
Nice.
If everyone expects there to be a monster in Loch Ness, then when they will see things as a monster in Loch Ness. In 2018, a joint international team from the universities of Otago in Copenhagen, Sweden, and Hull conducted a DNA survey of Loch Ness. They did this by collecting water and analyzing it for DNA to get a count of what kind of animals are in the loch. What they found was very interesting. There was no DNA of a sturgeon. There were no seal DNA.
Oh.
There was nothing reptilian, no catfish or sharks, no real large fish at all for that matter.
Huh.
But what they did find were eels. Shit tons of eels.
Eels? This is in Loch Ness, though.
Yes.
Why did they find the DNA of these other things? Because we know there are sturgeons in there.
Maybe they said the sturgeons have been seen in the river. So they could possibly be connected. So the thing is like, well, if they're there, they might be in there.
Oh, I see.
So they didn't find the sturgeon.
But none of those other
and
things
seals
are there
do
either.
Occasionally show up, but they're not like a regular visitor. So
not
at this
enough
time,
to have their DNA around.
Have their DNA in there.
But lots of eels.
Yeah, you would need a population to have the DNA in there.
Right.
Lots of eels. So
can eels bunch up together and make a dinosaur-shaped creature?
Eels are fucking crazy. The European eel is very interesting. It has this life cycle that they only figured out how they reproduce in 2022. Until 2022.
They figured it out.
Yes.
Because I remember hearing that they didn't know how eels reproduce, but I must have heard that over a year ago.
So
I didn't know they ever figured that out. Really?
So these eels are predominantly in freshwater,
right?
Rivers, lakes, and so on. But they're like reverse salmon. So where salmon go upriver to freshwater from saltwater to spawn and die, eels go the opposite direction.
They go to this ocean
They go to the
spawn?
ocean, and the eels from Europe don't just go to the ocean. They go to the Sargasso fucking Sea.
Where's the Sargasso Sea?
Like the Bermuda fucking Triangle, dude.
They go all the way across the Atlantic to the Caribbean.
And they've tagged them. It takes them 18 months to make this journey.
Eels. Wow.
And it turns out that like for a long time, no one knew what the larval form of an eel was. It's because they were misidentifying them. They didn't know that's what they were looking at.
They have seen these. They
classified them as a different kind of fish that they were finding in the Sargasso Sea. Because why would you think that thing in the Sargasso is an eel from the
North Atlantic eel?
Exactly.
Be in the Caribbean,
right?
Or near the Caribbean. Wow.
You would expect to find eels in this water. That's fair.
Yeah.
But because they found a whole bunch of them, they then made the jump to say like, well, maybe there's so much eel DNA, not because there's like so many eels, but because there's like a really big eel. And that's what the Loch Ness Monster is. It's
just
a
shedding
big
skin all the time,
fucking
creating
eel.
all this DNA for them to
But
find.
that can't be the case because eels have this life cycle. So it would like
it would
have
need to be leaving the loch.
Yeah, it'd leave the loch to go reproduce.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, but also I don't think that the zooplankton still wouldn't support a giant fucking eel. It
Yeah,
might support eels, but it's also like
the lack of zooplankton means that nothing that big is going to be living.
Yeah,
in
and
there.
it might be supporting all these eels only because it's seemingly not supporting a bunch of large fish. You know,
right?
And I don't know if the eels are cannibalistic, but either way, it's not a giant eel.
Mm-hmm.
Now, bringing it all the way back to 1933.
Okay.
And that heavier traffic load on the road alongside the loch. Locals had been traveling the same road for over 100 years, like we said, by that point. So they would be used to these things, these animals, and these weird quirks of the lake, at least, you know.
Uh-huh.
But non-locals are now traveling the road at a higher rate. So they're not used to that stuff. And when you have people that are unfamiliar with the loch and its peculiarities, and they're already being fed these folk tales of there being something in the lake, that psychology kicks in. And so now anything they see in there is going to become a monster. So the Loch Ness Monster isn't just one thing alone.
Yeah.
It's a collective monster of our imagination and shared culture. It is sustained by its own mythic nature and legend into a self-sustaining entity, shaped from the natural forces and nature of Loch Ness and polished by the illusion of stories and human creativity. Also, one of those first accounts from 1933 came from a local hotelier so of course, there was the economic interest in having a monster in the loch.
More
and
people will stay at my hotel.
And that aspect, of course, has proven to be very true. After all, there I was, a 13-year-old believer from half a world away, overcoming his fear of the unknown on a charted tour boat, looking for a monster, looking for the truth, and possibly searching for himself. I mean, it could have been all that, or hell, maybe it's just a dinosaur ghost. Garth's Corner?
Time for Garth's Corner. All right, everybody. I give you a little round of applause. That was amazing. Before we jump into Garth's Corner, I don't want to lose a thought that I had, and that's at the very top of the episode, I was out loud kind of wondering, like, what makes Nessie such a big deal of cryptids? And this whole little journey we've taken has kind of explained it to me. There are so many different things that it could be.
Yeah.
And it explains why so many people see the Loch Ness Monster, because there's like a half a dozen completely unrelated phenomena that look just like a monster.
Yeah. It's
so
also
Loch
like no
Ness
two
is just
descriptions that are the same.
Yeah, and it's a very specific kind of a loch that has all of these components. So of course
It's a
you're going to
monster
get a lot of
factory.
people. It's a monster factory, yeah. So it's like a perfect storm, as they say. Yeah, that explains it. I can see why so many people see the Loch Ness Monster. So yes, we're going to do a very quick little Garth's Corner here, which I think I always say.
Yeah.
But it's still true. Anyway, we'll start off with the Garth's Corner theme song, which is always different, and it's different this time as well. This is a song for new Jared, performed by original Jared and Garth. Blue Roan plays bass, and Garth strums along. Now here's the song. It's about to start. Here we go. New Jared walked out onto the day, and he looked at the sun in a funny little way, because the sun is toward the north, and in the southern hemisphere. New Jared smiled, using his lips on his mouth. Over here, new Jared, you're our John Henry. Now drive that railroad spike. You patronized us for the first time when we mentioned you that Tom Waits sounded like song. It's human v machine in this world of AI. No algorithm can match the virtue of a flesh and blood guy. So let's live and let live and see if we value humanity. But we may need a UBI to truly fly in this corporal oligarchy's cloud-based sky. But new Jared, you're the reason we include Monster Squadron members in these songs. What a great idea! Such patronage could surely right all earthly wrongs, at least in Garth's Corner. All right, so welcome to Garth's Corner.
I heard it. I just heard it.
Did you just hear it?
I just heard it.
All right, so this is the story of John Cobb. John Cobb was a British racing motorist. He was born in 1899, son of a wealthy fur broker in London. He went to Eton College, then Cambridge, and joined his father's firm. He became a managing director of a number of companies. He made a lot of money doing this. He used this money to finance his real passion, which was to pilot large-capacity, high-speed motor racing machines.
Oh, as one does.
Yeah, yeah,
When
yeah.
you're the son of a
When you're the
a wealthy person,
Yep.
your hobby is really
he's
fast
basically
boats.
Buckaroo Banzai, and he's trying to break the land speed record. And you got to see. I mean, here's a photo of one of the. This is the. Let's see. This is the Radian Special. Check out this machine. That's a race car. What? Describe that.
This is a spaceship on
It
wheels.
looks like a spaceship. Anyway, the through line of this guy's story is
Gotta go fast.
Oh, and everything he drove just looks like a Jetsons bubble. It's amazing.
It's like he's
style.
he's a futurist, but it's that Art Deco futurism.
Totally, yeah.
Like
And
he would have been like just at his home driving the Batmobile from Batman the Animated Series.
exactly. But this is like just. I mean, it looks like he's driving a flying saucer. Anyway, he during World War II, he was in the RAF, and when he got back from the war, he made a world record and then beat his own record as the fastest man alive. He traveled at 103 miles per hour on the Bonneville Salt Flats in 1947.
Oh man. Back when the speed record was 103 miles an hour.
Oh no, 403. I misspoke.
Oh shit! No, that is fast. That is very fucking impressive.
I'm reading my notes and looking at these pictures.
In what year? What year was that?
That was 1947.
Wow, that's really fucking fast on land. I mean,
Yeah.
planes were flying that fast.
Yeah,
but...
so he was called the fastest man. So for everybody who doesn't use miles per hour, that would be 649 kilometers an hour. I just showed you the photo of the Railton Special. So he decided after being the world's fastest man on
what else
land,
is there to do?
the next thing is be the world's fastest man on water. So
Which is sounds infinitely harder.
yeah, I don't think you can't go nearly as fast on water because you're pushing against water.
Yeah, it's a thick medium.
But he's got to find a really long lake. In order to pick up speed.
Well,
where do you think he went?
I know where he goes, but it's like, there's there's a lot of long lakes, dude. Lake Tahoe.
Well, this would have been late 40s, early 50s, so Loch Ness is already getting popular. I don't know if that's why he picked it.
Well,
he's British.
He's British.
So he's not going to go all the way to Tahoe.
Yeah. It's like, but he broke the land speed record in America because the Bonneville Flats.
Well, I don't know. Bonneville Salt Flats?
That's in.
Where is that?
The Bonneville Salt Flats, Utah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I
Yeah.
assumed it was salt flats in Britain. I guess there probably aren't any salt flats in Britain.
It's usually where everybody goes to try to break the record.
So I have a photo of him on Loch Ness with his speedboat, the Crusader, which is just as beautiful of a boat. Look at this thing. Isn't that weird?
It's like a sled.
It looks like a bulbous
It's like a
submarine.
catamaran sled marine.
And if you look at footage of it, I won't play it here because I don't have permission. But I actually emailed the people who own this because there's a great. We'll put a link to the YouTube video, but there's a great news of the world from 1952, and it shows him trying to break this record. It's actually a tragic story. This was September 29th, 1952. The Queen came to see him.
Oh,
and
Queen was there.
It was a big deal because he was already a very famous racer. And they had pegged out about a mile section, and it's a long lake. So he's going back and forth, just trying to pick up as much speed as possible. And he's going back and forth, and they're timing how long it takes for him to get across 1 mile.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, after doing it many, many times, he accidentally hit a wake, and it completely broke his boat apart. He killed him.
It exploded.
It basically, it fell apart, and there's actual footage of this in the newsreel. And the way the reel goes, it's like they have dramatic music, and the music crescendos, and you see this boat just burst apart.
Kind of like the Challenger.
Yeah, very much.
What's this thing called?
This was called the Crusader? Yeah, the
Challenger, Crusader. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, close.
Yeah,
There's something there. Yeah, anyway, he was tragically killed, and the only reason I bring up this story is I just wanted to show you those boats because they're amazing.
Well, I heard that there was a theory that
So
Nessie...
in 1975,
Okay, yes.
the Sun Classic Pictures documentary The Mysterious Monsters offered a theory that the wake was caused by the Loch Ness Monster who was trying to get out of the way of his boat.
Because as part of this setup is that they forbid boats to be making wakes, right? They had to like wait for everything to calm down, so there shouldn't have been a wake.
But as we've established, wakes are weird in Loch Ness.
Yes,
So maybe
and there's
there was
also
a delayed wake.
and there's also subaquatic waves that are hundreds of feet tall. So
Yeah.
I would be more surprised that he didn't hit a log or something submerged.
Yeah, because how would you even know if there was a log? It seems
Right.
like you'd want to
Yeah.
pick a clear lake to
Yeah.
do this
Yeah,
in, right?
a lake that only has you can only see 9 feet deep.
he's water skimming. When you look at this thing going,
Oh yeah,
I'll bet
it's hydroplaning.
It's hydroplaning.
Yeah.
I doubt any of it is more than a few inches below the water as it moves.
So, as part of my research, I watched another documentary, this time from National Geographic, that was called Drain the Oceans, where they like do a hypothetical thing where they go to bodies of water and they drain them so you can like see. And they,
fun.
Yeah, it's like, so they drain Loch Ness, right? And as part of it, they actually were doing another sonar scan and they found the wreckage of the Crusader.
Yes, they found it in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
So his body was thrown 50 yards beyond the wreckage and was recovered from the loch, taken back to his home in Surrey, where he was born and buried in Christchurch in Esher. The memorial, and then there was a memorial that was erected by the shore. And yes, to end Garth's Corner, in 2002, the remains of the jet engine boat, the Crusader, were found at a depth of 200 meters, which is 656 feet.
Wow.
And the site was designated a scheduled monument in 2005. There's a photo here of the plaque. There's beautiful design work on the things he wrote and beautiful design work on the plaque. Look at that.
Wow.
Isn't that cool? So there's a little memorial to him.
There will be pictures of all this on our on
Sorry,
our
this is a very
Tumblr.
visual Garth's Corner in audio form, but it's a very cool little monument to this guy.
Cool plaque.
Yeah. Anyway, that was the
Good
story.
kerning on the letter.
Nice kerning. Yeah. All the letters are perfectly spaced from one to the next. So yeah, that was Garth's Corner. John Cobb, a legend and a hero, and a fast dude,
and a victim of the Loch Ness Monster, by which we mean the natural conditions that exist within the loch itself.
Yes,
That's
a victim of the loch. Yes.
A victim of the loch. Wow.
Yep.
Well, I think that is going to bring us to the end. So we want to give a shout out to our Monster Squadron producers.
Okay.
If you're a Monster Squadron member, you get your name and a Garth's Corner song. Was that the last one? No.
We have some new patrons now,
Okay.
so there's going to be, I think I have at least one more person to do, maybe two.
Okay. Monster Squadron patron producers are Travis Alexander, the Bi Barbarian, Rachel Krieger, Tom Dahl, Justin Duckham, Kelly Flynn, Gunnar Franks, Carla Harrington, Lord Havelock, New Jared from the song, Brian Lamb, TJ Levenhagen, Alicia Overton, Jordan Ramey, and Blue Roan.
15.
Is that 15?
I think so. I was counting. I thought we were on at like 13 or 14. 15? Is that right?
Yeah, 15.
15.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank
They
you.
just keep sneaking in. We didn't even see the last one.
Yeah.
Suddenly we're up to 15.
15 Monster Squadron producers. And then we have other,
There are other patrons.
There's other patrons in other levels.
Give us less, but we also appreciate you as well.
Mm-hmm. If you want to send us something, you can send it to our P.O. Box. P.O. Box 22, Redwood Estates, California, 95044.
Yep.
Please send us something.
If we don't get anything, we're gonna have to do something else.
I'm gonna have to, yeah. I mean, it's convenient for sending things out to have a box.
That's true.
Makes sending things, but it is an expense.
Yeah.
You don't need to hear about our complaints, though. These are our poor decisions, not yours.
That's right.
Your only poor decision is not becoming a patron.
Well, you just wrapped that whole thought right up, didn't you? That was good. Very good. I think that's about it.
Yeah, join our Discord.
Join our Discord. Yeah, that's the
where
other
the Garth's moniker came from. Mm-hmm. We're going to be setting up a store soon for some merch. We're working on some merch.
That's our next plan with the podcast, is to hopefully have a store where you can get, stuff
Stuff
related to the podcast.
And what else? I think our next episode, we're going to be joined by the Doom Generation.
Right. We're doing a crossover episode with another podcast called The Doom Generation, which you've probably heard because they have ads on our podcast.
We run ads on our podcast, and this will be their second time joining us because we talked about a movie that was formative for young little believer Cody. We talked about the movie The Quest.
Yeah, which we referenced in this episode because the Donkagen,
spoilers, Donkagen.
We're doing another one called, what's the name of the movie?
We're talking about My Pet Monster.
My Pet Monster.
From the 1980s.
If you want to follow along with us when we do that episode, we'll be talking about it. So I've never seen My Pet Monster, but I'm going to.
And be horrified by it. And then for those patrons of us and the Doom Generation, not right away. I think there's some. It's going to take a bit, but in the not too distant future, somewhere in time and space, but not next Sunday afternoon, we are going to Mystery Science Theater style riff My Pet Monster with the Doom Generation.
Cool.
That's the plan.
Okay.
I think we're all still on that same page. And so if you're a patron of us...
How will people see that? They have to be a patron?
If you're a patron, you'll get a link that'll take you to a private Discord room where you will be able to watch, but not talk to us. You'll be able to observe, hear us. We're not going to be on camera, but you'll hear us making jokes and talking shit over the movie.
You can imagine our silhouettes down in the corner
as the movie plays.
As the movie plays. We're basically doing a commentary for the movie.
Yeah, a live commentary of this thing. But in the meantime, you can go watch it on YouTube. My Pet Monster.
Is it? Okay, so it's available, it's on YouTube.
My Pet Monster from like 1987, I think.
An 80s movie that is just free on YouTube. That's got to be a quality.
I used to have it on Betamax, and I'm half tempted to dig through my storage to pull out. I have the Betamax machine.
We're going to watch it. So maybe we should do it that way.
See it the way I did.
That would be very old school. If you can get that together.
Hopefully it doesn't eat the machine, eat the cassette.
Yeah, you don't want that.
But anyway, next time, tune in to hear us talk about our experience watching
That'll be
Pet
episode
Monster.
80 of the Least Haunted Podcast.
80, yeah.
Wow.
We're rounding the corner. We're getting down towards, this will be by the end of this season, we'll be at 100.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is it. This is the stretch to 100.
We're running.
Speaking of 100, and our future guest, Doom Generation Pod, yesterday, as of the day that we're recording this, just released their 100th episode.
Congratulations to Tessa and Nicole. That's amazing.
Huge.
Amazing.
And I think that's all I got to say.
I mean, I got nothing else to say other than I want to congratulate you on doing this was a big one. It's the Loch Ness Monster episode, and you hit it out of the park. That was fantastic. I was glad to be sitting here as an observer of this wonderful and chiming in here and there, but you had it all. You had it all, man. Nicely done.
Lock me, Amadeus.
Yeah. There's something to that. Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, so until next time, the only thing that's haunted
is you.
Laughing at you.
Hey, goodbye.
The coelacanth, thought to have become extinct about 50 million years ago, is described as a fish with arms and may prove to be the link between man and his sea ancestors.
Plesiosaur!
The Least Haunted Podcast is recorded before a dead studio audience and is a presentation of SEQUOIDEA Productions.
Tree fitted.